Hello everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mirz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Yud Beis Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We began yesterday Siman Reish Mem Ches, the halachas that pertain to somebody who wishes to embark on a journey on a ship or on a caravan. We have been discussing the halachas of traveling on a ship, and we will continue today. We will pick up on Yud Beis Amid Beis, 4 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch with Sif Beis. Our learning today should be a schus refuah shalema for Bracha Tova Bas Leah. It should also be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanesunu Batzaru Ba'Shivya Ha'imde Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamokim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yitziem Mitzala Lirvacha Me'afela La'ira U'Mishiba L'Geula Hashta Ba'Gala U'Bizman Kariv V'Naimar Amen. So, yesterday we began learning Siman Reish Mem Ches. We started learning the halachas of somebody who wants to take a journey on a ship. The Mechaber told us a halacha based on a brisa in Masechta Shabbos that if you want to travel on a ship for a Dvar Harishus, you are not allowed to set sail less than 3 days before Shabbos. You want to set sail Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, that's okay. But to set sail on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that would be usher. Now, the Mishnah Berurah, in his lengthy and beautiful Hakdama to this Siman, gave us basically 5 reasons that are given by the Rishonim why it's usher to embark, to set sail on the ship less than 3 days before Shabbos. The first reason that the Mishnah Berurah brought down was, by getting on the ship, we're afraid that you're putting yourself into a matzav where you may have to come to do Meleches Isser on Shabbos. When you're on a ship, you're in a Makom Sakana, and something could happen on Shabbos that would necessitate you going ahead and doing Malacha for Pikuach Nefesh. Maybe there'll be a storm and you'll have to help out with untying sails, tying sails, etc. Who knows what you might have to do. Now, at the time, it'll be mutter because of Pikuach Nefesh, but by getting on the ship within 3 days of Shabbos, you're putting yourself in a matziv where it may come that you may have to do malacha on Shabbos, and within 3 days of Shabbos, you're not allowed to do that. Another reason that was brought down is by getting on the ship, by going and buying a ticket and basically hiring the ship's crew to take you on your journey on the ship, what you're doing is you're creating a situation where these Einam Yehudim, the crew of the ship, are going to be doing malacha for you. So this may entail an Amir La'akum Shiloh. Isser number 3 that the Mishnah Berurah introduced to us was the question of Tchum. You're on a ship and you're traveling. You may very well go beyond the Tchum on Shabbos. So there's a possibility of Isser Tchumen. Then we had the rationale of the Rif. The Rif said, you know why you're not allowed to get on a ship within 3 days of Shabbos? Because we know people become seasick. When you go on the ship, the first 3 days you're distinctly uncomfortable, and you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. There's a mitzvah of Einik Shabbos. By getting on the ship within 3 days of Shabbos, you are being mavatal the mitzvah of Einik Shabbos. If you get on the ship 4 days before Shabbos, we assume that by the time 3 days pass, your body has acclimated itself to setting sail, to sailing on the seas. You're not going to be seasick anymore. There's going to be no bittul mitzvahs Einik Shabbos. The last reason that the Mishnah Berurah brought down was the problem of tzaf v'shat al panei hamayim. We know that you're not allowed to go swimming on Shabbos. The reason you're not allowed to go swimming on Shabbos is Gzera d'Rabbanan. What's the Gzera? If you're going to go swimming on Shabbos, you may come to construct somehow a flotation device. Maybe you'll take reeds and you'll go ahead and you'll weave them into a raft. This could entail all sorts of Isurei Shabbos, of Meleches Isser, and therefore you're not allowed to swim on Shabbos. And by going on a boat and going into the water on a boat, that is too similar to going swimming, to entering the water and going swimming, and therefore we assered going on a boat 3 days before Shabbos. Now, if it's assered to do these things within 3 days of Shabbos, why is it mutter to do these things in advance? So when it comes to the rationale of the Rif, when it comes to the rationale of the seasickness problem, we explained you're going to be acclimated to traveling by sea already by the time 3 days pass, and therefore there won't be a problem of bittul mitzvah Einik Shabbos. When it comes to the questions of you might have to come to do malacha, when it comes to the question of Isser Tchumin, over there, what we saw is the 3 days before Shabbos are considered to be connected to the coming Shabbos. Therefore, once it's already 3 days before Shabbos, the acharayis of the coming Shabbos is already upon you. You already have a responsibility to properly prepare for the coming Shabbos. Therefore, you can't put yourself in a matziv where you might have to do malacha. You can't put yourself in a matziv where you might be going outside of the tchum, because the responsibility of the coming Shabbos is already upon you. The previous 3 days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, those are connected to the previous Shabbos. Since those are connected to the previous Shabbos, if you're more than 3 days before the coming Shabbos, I don't have the responsibility yet of the coming Shabbos. I'm not up to that. I'm still connected to the previous Shabbos. I don't have an achrayus now to make sure that I'm not going to put myself in a matziv where I might have to do malacha on the coming Shabbos, and therefore these don't become a problem. That's basically what we've seen so far. And against that backdrop, let's take a look here at Sif Beis, 4 lines down on Yud Beis, Amid Beis, says the Mechaber. Ha de'ein mafligin besfina pachas mishloisha yamim kaidam HaShabbos. This Isser, says the Mechaber, that I introduced to you in Sif Aleph, that for a Dvar Rishus, you're not allowed to set sail less than 3 days before Shabbos. Hatam, the reason is Mishum Einig Shabbos. So, as the Chavetz Chaim told us in the Hakdama, here in Sif Beis, the Mechaber takes the position of the Rif. The Mechaber tells us, you know why you're not allowed to set sail less than 3 days before Shabbos? Because you're going to be mevatel the mitzvah of Einik Shabbos. Continues the Mechaber, Shekol Shloisha Yamim Harishonim, because for the first 3 days that you're on the ship, Yesh Lahem Tsar Ubilbul. You have tsar, you're suffering, you're distinctly uncomfortable, ubilbul, and you're all disoriented from seasickness and the discomfort of a journey by sea. The Mishnah Berurah also mentioned the bad odor of the salt water. And based on this, says the Mechaber, V'dafka lamafligim bayamim hamaluchim. Since I'm telling you that the problem of setting sail within 3 days of Shabbos is the tsar and the bilbul, it's the bittul mitzvah Einik Shabbos, this is only negeya when you're setting sail on the ocean. When you're going out on the salt water, when you're traveling by sea, that's when you have this issue. Aval banaharos, but if you're going on a river cruise, ein shum tsar lamafligim behem. On a river cruise, people generally speaking do not get seasick. It's nice, comfortable, smooth flowing water. You don't have the currents and the waves and the swells, etc., etc. So you generally don't become seasick on a river cruise. Therefore, says the Mechaber, that would not be a problem. Ulefikach, therefore, mutter lahaflig bohem, you would be allowed to set sail on a riverboat afilu be'erev Shabbos, even on Erev Shabbos. You don't have to be more than 3 days in advance of Shabbos, because you don't have this issue of bittul Einik Shabbos. However, the Mechaber gives a very important caveat. V'hu, when is this true? That you could go on a river cruise less than 3 days before Shabbos. You could embark on a trip on the river less than 3 days before Shabbos. When is that so? V'hu, shelo yehei yadua lanu. This is only true if we do not know for certain she'ein ba'omkam asar tvachim, that where you're going to be traveling, the water is shallower than 10 tvachim. So again, this is only true if you do not know for certain that you're going to be traveling by boat in areas where the water is shallow, and therefore from the bottom of the boat to the riverbed is going to be less than 10 tvachim. But in places where we know for certain that from the bottom of the boat to the riverbed Pachas me'asar tvachim is shallower than 10 tvachim, then Asar then it would be forbidden, and in the parentheses they put in, Lotzeis chutz l'tchum, you would not be allowed to travel on this boat, even on the river, and go out of the tchum, mishum iser tchumin, because now you have another problem. You have a problem of tchum. So, what do we have over here? The Mechaber told us, why are you not allowed to embark on a journey by ship less than 3 days before Shabbos? Because of the problem of bittul mitzvahs oinik Shabbos, like the Rif says. The first 3 days you're going to be uncomfortable, so you can't get on the ship less than 3 days before Shabbos. You'd be mevatel the mitzvah of Einik Shabbos. Therefore, says the Mechaber, you want to go on a river cruise? On a river cruise, people generally don't get seasick. So you don't have this problem. So you want to go on a river cruise, you could do it even on Erev Shabbos, even for a Dvar HaRishus, even an optional trip. You could go even on Erev Shabbos, because you don't have the problem of bittul mitzvahs Einik Shabbos. But, says the Mechaber, very important caveat, this is only true if you're not going to have the problem of going chutz l'tchum. When is that so, that you don't have the problem of going chutz l'tchum? Says the Mechaber, if you don't know for certain that you're going to be traveling in shallow water, where the bottom of the boat is within 10 tefachim of the riverbed, then you're okay. Why? Because the problem of tchum only exists when you're within 10 tefachim of the karka. When you're above 10 tefachim from the riverbed, you don't have a problem of tchum. You're out of the sugya of tchum. L'mayla me'asar tefachim, the halachas of tchum, the parsha of tchum is not negeya. It's only negeya if you're within 10 tefachim of the riverbed. Therefore, says the Mechaber, if you don't know for certain that you're going to be traveling in shallow water where you're within 10 tefachim of the riverbed, then you have a suffix. And tchum is a din d'Rabbanan. Since it's a din d'Rabbanan, sveika d'Rabbanan l'kula. We could go l'kula, and we could assume that you're above 10 tefachim, and the halachas of tchum are not negated to you. But if you know for certain that you're traveling in shallow water, and you're within 10 tefachim of the riverbed, then you don't have a suffix. And then you know you're going outside of the tchum, that would be a problem even on the river. Let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your base. Afilu be'erev Shabbos. The Mechaber said, you want to go on a river cruise, you could embark even on Erev Shabbos. Ve'ein tzarech lifsok imoy sheyishbos. If you remember, yesterday we learned that if you travel within 3 days of Shabbos, let's say for a Dvar Mitzvah, you're supposed to go over to the crew of the boat and ask them, please stop on Shabbos. If they don't stop on Shabbos, it's not your problem. But you're supposed to at least make that attempt to ask them to stop on Shabbos. Over here, you're going on a river cruise, says the Mishnah Berurah, and the Mechaber says it's mutter to travel. Even on Erev Shabbos, you don't have to make this Tanai either. You don't have to ask them to stop on Shabbos. Ule'inyan lahaflik b'Shabbos. Now, we're talking here on Erev Shabbos. How about to get on the ship on Shabbos? That we're going to discuss later today in Sif Gimel. Ois Katan Yod Gimel, says the Mishnah Berurah. The Mechaber said, when I'm telling you that on a river you could get on the ship even on Erev Shabbos, that's only if there's no tchum issue. V'hu shaloi. This is only if you don't know for certain that you're traveling in shallow water where you're within 10 tefachim of the riverbed. Why is it okay? They came on the tchum in the Rabbananu, because since the whole halacha of tchum is a din d'Rabbanan, if you don't know for sure that you're within 10 tefachim of the riverbed, you have a sveika d'Rabbanan. Sveika d'Rabbanan l'kula. Now, the Mishnah Berurah puts in over here a technical point. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you might wonder, there are those that say, we know, what's the Isser of Tchum? The Isser of Tchum is you're not allowed to go more than 2,000 amas beyond the city limit. But there is another shita of Tchum. Now that, 2,000 amas we accept as a din d'Rabbanan. But there are those that say that to travel 12 mil outside the city limits, a mil is 2,000 amas. 12 mil is 24,000 amas. There are those that say that to travel 12 mil, 24,000 amas beyond the city limits, that's already a din d'oraisa. So we're saying over here, if you don't know for certain that you're within 10 tefachim of the riverbed, so you have a sveika d'Rabbanan l'kula, you can get on the ship on Erev Shabbos. How about if you're going to travel 12 mil? If you're going to travel 12 mil, Now you already have a Sveika Daraisa. If you're within 10 Tfachim of the riverbed, and you go 12 mil, maybe this is a Sveika Daraisa. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. In our case, it's not a Sveika Daraisa, even if you travel 12 mil. Why? Because you're traveling by ship. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. Va'afilu tchum diyud beis mil. Even the question of traveling 12 mil beyond the city limits, kaimalon de biyamim unaharois ein behen iser daraisa ledivrei hakoil. Even those that say that traveling by land 12 mil beyond the city limits is an iser daraisa, everybody agrees that traveling by water, traveling on a ship, even 12 mil is only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Why? She'ein doimin ledigle midbar. We learn out the halachas of Tchum from Eretz Yisrael camping in the midbar, from the Machaneh in the midbar. Because Moshe Rabbeinu made an announcement, Moshe Rabbeinu, by Parshas Truma, Moshe Rabbeinu called out to Klal Yisrael. Well, actually, Truma was really the conversation between the Rabbeinu Shalom and Moshe Rabbeinu. I guess this was really in Vayakel. Moshe Rabbeinu asks Klal Yisrael to come bring donations for the building of the Mishkan. When he had enough, he made an announcement. Vayaviru koil b'machaneh. He made an announcement and he said, Al teitzei ishbim kaimai. Everybody should stay where they are. Don't come to me to bring more donations. We learn out from there the din of Tchumen, that on Shabbos, Al Yetzei Ishbim Kaimai. Everybody has to stay where they are on Shabbos. So all of the dinim of Tchumen come from the Machaneh in the Midbar. Now, in the Machaneh in the Midbar, people traveled by land. They didn't travel by sea. Therefore, even the question of 12 mil, where some people hold that it's an Issa Daraisa, not by sea, only by land. Lefikach talinon bisveika lahakel. Since in any case, no matter what, 2,000 amas, 12,000 amas, 24,000 amas, whatever you're talking about, this is only a din d'Rabbanan by sea. Lefikach talinon bisveika lahakel. Therefore, we could go in a suffix. We could be mekel of Amrinon, and we will assume the amay kasar tfachim mikarka hasfina lakarka amayim. Since we don't know for certain, we will assume that the depth is greater and is more than 10 tfachim from the bottom of the boat to the riverbed. Ve'ein tchum min lamayla me'asara, and there's no din of tchum when you're more than 10 tfachim above the karka, and therefore there's no iser tchumin over here. Now, the Mechaber told us over here that the way we have to measure the 10 tfachim, you take a look at the words of the Mechaber. This is right by the Ois Cotton Yud Dalid in the words of the Mechaber for the Mishnah Berurah. In a place where we are certain, we know for sure, that from the bottom of the boat, the karka hasfina is all the way in the bottom of the boat, the very floor, the keel of the boat. Mikarka hasfina lakarka hanor, to the riverbed, is pachas be'asar tfachim. If we know for sure, the captain got up and he made an announcement, everybody should be aware that we're traveling in very shallow water. There's only 2 feet between the bottom of the boat and the riverbed. So now you know for certain that you're traveling within 10 tfachim of the ground, then osir. Then you're not even allowed to get on a river cruise less than 3 days before Shabbos because you have an Issa Tchumen and you're going to be traveling outside of the Tchum. What the Mishnah Berurah is going to focus on now is the way the Mechaber is measuring the 10 tfachim. He's measuring the 10 tfachim from the very bottom of the boat to the riverbed. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Pirush. Let's say the water level is more than 10 tfachim off the riverbed. Okay? So let's say the water is 15 amas deep. So if you would measure for the water level to the riverbed, you have more than 10 tfachim. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, im hasvina mishukas pamayim, we know that the boat sinks into the water. The boat doesn't ride on top of the water, it sinks down into the water. Im hasvina mishukas pamayim, she'ein bein karka hasvina lekarka amayim, so that there isn't from the bottom of the boat to the surface of the riverbed, asar tvachim, So then you don't have a problem. Now the Mishnah Berurah makes another point. Let's think about this for a minute. Let's say from the bottom of the boat to the riverbed is 9 tfachim. But you are in a stateroom on the 4th level of the superstructure of the ship. So you know where you are? You're 20 amas higher than the bottom of the boat. So it's very nice. The bottom of the boat is less than 10 tfachim above the riverbed. But you're not less than 10 tfachim above the riverbed. You're all the way up there. You might be 30 amas above the riverbed. So why do you have a problem with tchum? Why do we measure the tchum issue from the keel of the boat to the riverbed? Why don't we measure it from where you are to the riverbed? So it says the Mishnah Berurah like this. If from the if the bottom of the boat is less than 10 tfachim above the riverbed, certainly, if you're sitting all the way in the bottom of the boat, if you're in the hold all the way at the bottom, and you are physically located less than 10 tfachim above the riverbed, so for sure, then of course you have a tchum issue, because you are physically located less than 10 tfachim above the riverbed. But even if you're located in this ship, on a high place in the ship, you're all the way up on top in the superstructure of the ship. So you're way higher than 10 tfachim within the riverbed. Gam kain aser. There is still an iser tchumen. Why? Kevan shahasvina rechava arba, since the ship is more than 4 tfachim wide, the nicha lehiluch, and it's very easy and comfortable to walk on the surface of the ship, ka'oimid lamata damya. This makes it as if you are standing on the bottom. Now let me explain to you, based on the Gemara in Eruvin, what the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here. We say that the Isser of Tchumen is only when you're Lamata Me'asara. You have to be less than 10 Tfachim elevated above the ground. Okay. Now, there's a ground level. Now, let's say there's a hill. Let's say there's a tall hill. And you're walking on top of the hill. Do we say that if the top of the hill is more than 10 Tfachim high, elevated above the ground level, so now Tchumen are not negated to you? Because you're more than 10 Tfachim off the ground? No, certainly not. Why? Because the hill is aros semichta. The hill is considered an extension of the ground. So you're not more than 10 tefachim elevated from the ground. Your feet are on the ground, on the top of the hill. And that's very easy to understand because that's the topography of the ground. Well, now let's give another case. Let's say there's the ground level and the topography is that the earth where you are is nice and level. And now there's a man-made structure. Somebody built a pillar, and the pillar is 12 tfachim tall. And the top of the pillar is a nice wide area. It's more than dalet al dalet. It's more than 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. And you're standing up there. Do you have a halacha of tchum? Is tchum negayah to you? Or do we say tchum's not negayah to you because you're more than 10 tfachim off the ground? The Gemara in Eruvin says no. Tchum does apply to you up there. Why? Because this man-made structure, since its top surface is nicha lehiluch, it's comfortable to walk on, this man-made structure is also considered aros semichta. It's also considered an extension of the ground. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we're going to apply the same thing to the ship. It's true. You might be 30 tfachim above the riverbed because you've got a stateroom up on level 3 of the superstructure of the ship. But if the keel of the ship is less than 10 tfachim off the riverbed, then upstairs where you are is aros semichta. It's considered an extension. Since the keel is less than 10 tfachim off the riverbed, it's considered attached to the riverbed. And now you up there are just an extension of the keel and an extension of the ground, of the riverbed, because it's all Ara Semichta. Finally, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'yesh matirin kishu yoshev l'mayla me'asar tvachim. There are those who disagree with this. There are those that say, and he brings this down from Rebbe Elazar Mimitz, there are those that say that if you physically are located more than 10 tfachim above the riverbed, ve'ein raglav tluyois lamata me'asar tfachim, and your feet don't extend less than 10 tfachim within the riverbed, that you could be mekel. And says the Mishnah Berurah, v'yesh lismay chal devreihem, you could rely on that shita kishu tzarich lakach, when there's a tzarich, you could rely on that shita. The Mechaber said that if you do know that you're traveling within 10 tfachim of the riverbed, then asur lotzes, then you're not allowed to embark on this ship on Erev Shabbos because you have an Isser Tchumen. Says the Mishnah Berurah, asur lotzes, hainu b'chala shloisha yamim shekodim Shabbos. This is not only on Erev Shabbos that you're not allowed to get on the riverboat if there's an Isser Tchum. No, for 3 days before Shabbos, you're not allowed to get on the riverboat because of the Isser Tchumen. If you know that on Shabbos you're going to travel in an area where you are within 10 tfachim of the riverbed, then for 3 days you're not allowed to get on the ship. Because you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be over on Tchum. Within 3 days of Shabbos, you're not allowed to put yourself in a situation where you might come to transgress in the Isser of Shabbos. But more than 3 days before Shabbos, on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, mutter. That's mutter, like the Ramah told us yesterday. The Ramah told us yesterday that more than 3 days before Shabbos, you're allowed to get on a ship. All of these problems aren't negaya then. Okay, so now we're going to go into the words of the Ramah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines off the bottom near the end of the line. Hagah. So we had the Mechaber over here. The Mechaber took the position of the Rif. The Mechaber told us, you know why you're not allowed to get on a ship within 3 days of Shabbos? You're not allowed to get on a ship because of bittul mitzvahs oinik Shabbos, because of the discomfort that exists for the first 3 days when you travel by sea. Said the Mechaber, this is only negaya when you travel by sea. You travel on a river cruise, it's okay, because there won't be any Mrs. Bittul oinik Shabbos. Caveat, there can't be an Isser Tchumen. You have to have at least a suffix that there isn't an Isser Tchumen. So, if you don't know for certain that you're within 10 tfachim of the riverbed, you have a suffix, Seiked Rabbana Lakula, you could go. But if you know for certain you're going to be within 10 tfachim, Isser Tchumen. Isser Tchumen, you can't get on the boat for 3 days. Says the Ramah, Hagah. V'chein b'sfina sheyitztarech ha'Yisrael lavoi lidei melacha b'Shabbos. So too, the Mechaber gave you one caveat. The Mechaber told you could get on a riverboat on Erev Shabbos because there's no problem of Bittul Einik Shabbos. Caveat, but if there's an Isser Tchumen, you cannot. Says the Ramah, you also can't get on the riverboat within 3 days of Shabbos if you're going to put yourself in a position where you might have to do melacha on Shabbos. Then also likanis b'shloisha yom kaidem Shabbos afilu heim naharos hanoivim v'hila ma'ila me'asara. If you know, or you have a very strong reason to believe, that by getting on this boat within 3 days of Shabbos, you might put yourself in a matziv where you're going to have to do meleches iser on Shabbos, then you're not allowed to get on the boat, even if it's on a river, so the water is very calm and there's no problem of bittul mitzvah zaynik Shabbos. Even if the water is deep, so there's no Isser Tchumen. But if by getting on that boat, you might put yourself in a matziv where you have to do meleches Isser on Shabbos, you're not allowed to get on the boat. Why? Because it's within 3 days of Shabbos. Within 3 days of Shabbos, you already have the achrayus of Shabbos to make sure that you don't put yourself in a position where you might do melacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Tes Zayin, Lidei Melacha. You can't put yourself in a position where you might have to do melacha, afilu melacha d'Rabbanan. This is not only Isurei Daraisa, even Isurei D'Rabbanan. Ois Katan Yud Zayin, you're not allowed to get on the boat within 3 days of Shabbos. Likanis b'shloisha yom hatam. What's the reason for this? This is like we learned yesterday in Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Ches, because for 3 days before Shabbos, you already have the achrayus of the coming Shabbos. Now the Mishnah Berurah, now says the Ramah weiter, says the Ramah by the Ois Katan Yud Ches of the Mishnah Berurah, 5 lines off the bottom. Aval, however. What's the however? So the Ramah just told you, the Mechaber said you're allowed to get on a river cruise even on Erev Shabbos because there's no problem with Bittul Mitzvah Seinik Shabbos. However, you have to make sure that there's no problem with Issa Truman. Said the Ramah, you also have to make sure that there's no problem you might come to do Melacha. Now the Ramah says, but there's one area that you do not have to be concerned about. Aval. And we touched upon this yesterday. Aval. Ein iser b'masha b'heimois moishchois hasvina b'svas hanor. If you're going on one of these river boats where the animals walk on the banks of the river and they pull the boat by virtue of ropes that attach them to the ship, that's not an issue. You're allowed to get on the boat within 3, if it's calm water, so there's no Einik Shabbos problem. If it's shallow water, or at least it might be shallow water, so there's no problem of tchum. If there's no problem of malacha, if the only possible problem that there is that you're getting on a boat that's being pulled by animals, says the Ramah, that's not an issue. And explains the Ramah why he's telling this to you. This is not the equivalent of getting on a horse-drawn wagon or an ox team drawn wagon before Shabbos, which you're never allowed to do, even 7 days, 6 days before Shabbos. No such thing as 7 days before Shabbos. Even 6 days before Shabbos, you're not allowed to get into a horse-drawn wagon if the wagon is going to be going on Shabbos. That's because of Xera, that you might break off a branch and use it as a switch to hit the animal, which is not the gay over here because you're too far away from the animal, says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yud Ches. Ein Isser B'Mesha Behemois. You don't have to worry about the question of that you're getting into a boat that's being drawn by animals. What the Ramah wants to say is, if you don't have to deal with any other potential isurim, you're talking about calm water, so there's no problem of bittul mitzvah seinik Shabbos. And you're traveling more than 10 tfachim off the riverbed, so there's no isur tchum. And also, there's no question you're not going to have to do any malacha on Shabbos. So there's none of these issues. Ein lesser lisa basvina. You should not forbid getting on the boat because the animals are pulling the boat. Because you want to draw an equivalent between that and getting onto a wagon that's being drawn by animals. The aser, which is aser. We don't say that. Why? Because by the wagon that's being drawn by animals, hatam, the reason it's aser is because because you might break off a branch and use it as a switch to make the animal go. But over here, the animals are traveling far away from the ship. The ship is in the water. The animals are on the banks. And therefore it would be mutter to get on this craft even within 3 days of Shabbos. Now we come to a very fascinating sif. One thing I have to point out to you before we start this sif. In the Hakdama to today's shir, I went through all the various reasons that the Rishonim gave that we learned about in the Mishnah Berurah's Hakdama, what the Isurim are involved with embarking on to sail on a ship. We spoke about that you might have to do malacha. We spoke about Amir La'akum. We spoke about Bittul Mitzvahs Einik Shabbos. But we also spoke about Shitas Tosfos. And that was the Gzera of Tzaf V'Shat Al Panei Mayim. The Gzera that by getting on the boat, it's as if you're getting into the water, and there's a Gzera D'Rabbanan that you're not allowed to swim on Shabbos because you might form a flotation device. Now that we have not spoken about yet, and that's going to come into play in Sif Gimel. Now, another concept that you need to know for Sif Gimel. There's a concept called being koine shvisa when Shabbos comes in. What does that mean? Wherever you start Shabbos, wherever you are physically located, when Shabbos comes in, you're koine shvisa. You acquire your place, this becomes your place for Shabbos. Wherever you are when Shabbos comes, that's your place for Shabbos. Now that has ramifications in halacha. The most well-known ramification of that in halacha is when it comes to the Isser of Tchum. You're not allowed to travel 2,000 amas beyond the city limit. You start Shabbos in a city, you're kind of shvisa in that city. So now you're not allowed to travel 2,000 amas beyond that city's limits. So wherever you're kind of shvisa, that's how we judge where your tchum is. But there are other ramifications of where you're kind of shvisa as well. One we're going to see right now. Now we're going to discuss this in the context of tchumin in this sif as well in the Mishnah Berurah. But let's see what the Mechaber says, 4 lines off the bottom of sif gimel. Heicha de mutter lahaflig me erev Shabbos. In cases where it's mutter to get on the boat on erev Shabbos. So what would be a case where it's mutter? Well, you're going on a river cruise, so there's no problem of bittul mitzvah sonik Shabbos. You're more than 10 tefachim elevated off the riverbed, or at least there's a suffix, so there's no isser of tchumin. And you know that you're not going to have to come to do malacha on Shabbos, so there's no concern that you might do malacha on Shabbos. And also there's no concern of amir la'akum because the boat is full of Einam Yehudim, and we could assume that the malacha that the Einam Yehudim are doing, they're not doing for you, they're doing it primarily for the Einam Yehudim. So now you have a situation where you're allowed to get on the boat on Erev Shabbos. But you're not allowed to get on the boat on Shabbos. You know why you're not allowed to get on the boat on Shabbos? Because when you get on the boat on Shabbos, you're entering the water on Shabbos. And the Mechaber holds that Tosfos' concern of the Gzera of Tzaf V'Shat Al Pnei Hamayim is only when you go into the water on Shabbos. You're not allowed to go swimming on Shabbos because of that Gzera. You're also not allowed to get on the boat on Shabbos because of that Gzera. So, says the Mechaber, Heicha de mutter lahaflig me'erev Shabbos. In a case where I'm telling you that it's mutter to get on the boat on Erev Shabbos. Im nichdas pasvina me'erev Shabbos. If you get on the boat properly on Erev Shabbos, but the boat is docked. The boat's not traveling yet. You got on the boat on Erev Shabbos, but they didn't set sail yet. Im nichdas pasvina me'erev Shabbos. If you get on the boat properly on Erev Shabbos, v'kana b'shvisa, and you are kind of shvisa on the boat. What does that mean? You got on the boat on Erev Shabbos before Shkia, and you remained on the boat from before Shkia until after Tzeis HaKechavim. So you were on the boat from before Shkia for the whole period of Ben Hashmashos and after Tzeis. So we know that you started Shabbos on the boat. Since you started Shabbos on the boat, you were kind of shvisa on the boat. Why is that important? Says the Mechaber, in such a case, af al pi shamafleges b'Shabbos, even if they set sail on Shabbos, mutter, this is mutter. What's the Mechaber saying? The Mechaber is saying like this. We have Tosfos' concern of the Gzera of Tzaf V'Shat al Pnei Hamayim on Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, if you got on the boat before Shkia, and you were kind of shvisa on the boat by staying there until after Tzeis HaKechavim, so that means that you were kind of shvisa on the boat became your place for Shabbos. Now they set sail. We don't look at it as if you entered the water on Shabbos. You didn't enter the water on Shabbos. You entered the water before Shabbos. They set sail on Shabbos, not an issue. But, says the Mechaber, V'hu shelo yotza me'asvina me'es shekana shvisa. But this is only true if you did not leave the boat between Tzeis HaKechavim, right? That's when you were kind of shvisa. You were kind of shvisa when Shabbos came in. So you got on before Shkia, you stayed there for Ben Hashmashos, you were there by Tzeis HaKechavim, you were kind of shvisa. But what if the boat's not leaving until 11 o'clock at night? And what you did was, you got off the boat. Sometime after Tzeis HaKechavim, you decided you want to go for a spazier on the boardwalk. So you left the boat after you were kind of shvisa. Then, says the Mechaber, you have a problem. Why? Because now you got off the boat, and now you're getting back on the boat after Shabbos. Now it's like you went into the water on Shabbos. You're not allowed to go into the water on Shabbos, because then you have the gzeira of tzaf v'shat al panei hamayim. If you get on the boat before Shabbos, and you kind of shvisa on the boat, so then you got on the boat before Shabbos, the gzeira of tzaf v'shat al panei hamayim doesn't apply to you, according to the Mechaber. But if you were kind of shvisa on the boat, and the boat didn't disembark yet, it didn't set sail yet, and you disembarked, you got off the boat, and now you come back on the boat on Shabbos, that you can't do, because of the gzeira of tzaf v'shat al panei hamayim. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cutting your test. Heicha de mutter. In cases where it's mutter to set sail on Erev Shabbos, says the Mishnah Berurah, Pirush. The explanation of this is, the Mechaber so far was only matir to get on a boat on Erev Shabbos when it's calm water and there's no problem with tchum because you're more than 10 tefachim above the water. Ela lahafli be'erev Shabbos. You're only allowed to set sail on Erev Shabbos. Avo b'Shabbos, but to set sail on Shabbos, loy. That the Mechaber was never matir. The Khan, but over here in Sif Gimel, Asi or Ruye, now the Mechaber wants to tell you that sometimes af b'Shabbos mutter lahaflik b'hem. Sometimes you could set sail even on Shabbos. Ois katan chaf shvisa. He says if you were kind of shvisa on the boat, hainu sheyoshav sham kol ben hashmasha isachetetshach. What does it mean to be kind of shvisa on the boat? It means that you are on the boat from before shkia for the entire ben hashmashas until after tzeis. So now you were kind of shvisa on the boat. Then you can even set sail on Shabbos. If the boat starts going 11 o'clock at night, you're okay. But, said the Mechaber, v'hu shelo yotza. But that's only if you did not disembark after tzeis, before you set sail. If you disembarked after you were kind of shvisa, and now you came back on the boat, now you got a problem. Now you're not allowed to set sail. Why, says the Mishnah Berurah? Di lav hachi. Because if you did leave the boat, if you disembarked, asa likanis ba b'Shabbos. Now you're not allowed to get onto the boat on Shabbos. Because now it's if you're going into the water on Shabbos, and now you have the problem of the gzeira of tzat v'shat al panei hamayim, and this is also like we're going to learn quite a while from now in Siman Shin Lamed Tes. However, the Ramah brings down a shita that disagrees with this. 2 lines off the bottom, it says the Ramah Hago. The Yeshayim there are those that say afilu yotza min hasvina shari, that even if you leave the boat after you were kind of shvisa, you're allowed to get back on the boat and set sail on Shabbos. Why? Says the Ramah, because these shitas hold. Once you were kind of shvisa, when Shabbos came in, that's what it means there, by Erev Shabbos. Since you were on the boat from before Shkia throughout Ben Hashmasers until Tzeis, so once you were kind of shvisa on the boat, mutar achakach likanis ba b'Shabbos ulahaflik. You're allowed to get back on the boat on Shabbos, and the problem of the gzeira of tzaf v'shat al panei hamayim doesn't apply to you. Why? Mishnah Berurah explains it very beautifully. He says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Chaf Beis, Demeyacha shekana ba hainu. Dal yedezeh, since you were kind of shvisa on the boat when Shabbos came in, havalei asvina kebeisoi. Since you were kind of shvisa on the boat when Shabbos came in, the boat is your house for Shabbos. You acquired the boat as your mokaim for Shabbos. That's your place for Shabbos. Now it's like your house. So now, when you get out and you go and take a spazier on the boardwalk, and you come back on the boat 9:30 at night, way after Tzeis, on Shabbos, it doesn't look anymore in the eyes of halacha like you're going for a swim. It doesn't look like you're going into the water. You're going back into your house. Because you were kind of shvisa on the boat. So kishenichtas ein nira kishat kishenichtas pa b'Shabbos. Now the Mishnah Berurah is going to make a fascinating point that has ramifications for Tchum. I told you that the most well-known ramification of being koine shvisa is in the context of Tchum. So let me just give you a brief akdama so that we can go quickly through this Mishnah Berurah. We're already starting to get to my self-imposed time limit. But we need to understand this. When it comes to Tchum, your koine shvisa, wherever you are when Shabbos comes in, that's where we measure your Tchum from. But in order for that to work, you have to be in the parsha of Tchum in order to be koine shvisa. Let's say you're out of the parsha of Tchum. What does that mean? Well, we learned about it already. What if when Shabbos comes in, you are more than 10 tfachim removed from the ground? You're l'mayla me'asar tfachim. If you're l'mayla me'asar tfachim, where were you koine shvisa? Bear this in mind. Says the Mishnah Berurah. The Ramah just said that if you get on the boat before Shkia and you're on the boat for the whole Bein Hashmoshes period, you're koine shvisa on the boat. Therefore, even if you get off the boat, you could get back on the boat and set sail on Shabbos. Why? Because you were koine shvisa on the boat. And by being koine shvisa on the boat becomes like your house. Says the Ramah, are we going to extend that to Tchum? Are we going to say that you're koine shvisa on the boat for the question of Tchum? That's going to depend. Says the Mishnah Berurah like this. Even according to this shita presented by the Ramah, that says that you're koine shvisa on the boat, and now you can get off the boat, come back, and the gzeir of tzaf v'shat apanei hamayim doesn't apply to you. Einay moya lakinyan shvisa. This concept that we're saying that you're koine shvisa on the boat only helps you. Ela sheyamutu likanes b'asfina b'Shabbos. It works to the context of this halacha that when you finish your spazier on the boardwalk, you could get on the boat. But now you go sailing. When you get to your destination, when you dock at the end of your destination, if it's on Shabbos, you're not going to be able to leave your arba amos. Now, what does that mean? You're not going to be able to leave your arba amos? It means you're going to have to stay on the boat. Doesn't mean literally your 4 amos, because on the boat you could go wherever you want, but you're not going to be allowed to disembark from the boat, because by disembarking from the boat, you're going to be going outside of your tchum. Why? The problem over here is, if you got off the boat, so let's figure this out. Let's go through this technically. You were on the boat during Ben Hashmoshes. So you were koine shvisa on the boat. Now we're assuming that the boat is l'mayla me'asar tfachim. So in the context of Tchum, were you koine shvisa on the boat? Debatable. You were outside of the parsha of Tchum. You were l'mayla me'asar tfachim. But now, 9 o'clock at night, before the boat set sail, after Tzeisak Echavim, you got off the boat and you went on the boardwalk. Oh, you know what happened now? You put yourself into the parsha of Tchum. Now you're lamata me'asar tfachim. So now you were koine shvisa on the dry land. Now you went back on the boat. Now the boat traveled. Now, even though the boat is l'mayla me'asar tfachim, so you don't have a problem that you're traveling outside of the Tchum, but you're more than 2,000 amas of the place that you were when you were koine shvisa. So now when the boat lands at its destination, you can't get off the boat. Because if you get off the boat and you step on the dry land at your destination, you have now traveled more than 2,000 amas outside of your Tchum. So points out the Mishnah Berurah, the Ramah just said that you were koine shvisa on the boat. Not really. If you got off the boat after Ben Hashmoshes was over and you stepped back on the dry land, then in the concept of Hilchas Tchumen, you were koine shvisa on that dry land. Therefore, when you arrive at your destination, you're not going to be allowed to get off the boat, because by getting off the boat, you're going out of your original tchum. As to what happens if you arrive at your destination inside a walled city, we're going to deal with that later. But let's say you got on the boat before Shkia, you stayed on the boat for Ben Hashmashas, and you never got off the boat. You never went back onto dry land. So you were kind of shvisa on the boat, and you never went off. Then when your boat gets to the destination, you could get off the boat, and you have 2,000 amas from the city limits from your destination. Because when you step foot on dry land, that's when you're kind of shvisa for tchumen. You weren't really kind of shvisa for tchumen on the boat, because the boat is l'mayla me'asar tvachim. So when were you kind of shvisa le'inyan tchumen? When you arrived at your destination and you got off the boat. This whole conversation is only negeya when the boat was always l'mayla me'asar tvachim v'kamavursham. Ubasvina gufa, as long as you're on the boat, mahalak is kula. You can walk anywhere you want in the boat. Even if Erev Shabbos, again, you were kind of shvisa on the boat, and then you got off the boat for a spatzir on the boardwalk, and then you got back after you walked back on the ship after Shabbos started, you could still walk anywhere you want on the boat. Because you started Shabbos on the boat. If you were never kind of shvisa on Erev Shabbos at all, Mishnah Berurah, we will go through this in detail. Just a little bit more. Shvisa me Erev Yom Tov. The Ramah said that this shita says, since you were kind of shvisa on the boat from the beginning of Shabbos, so now if you get off the boat and come back on, we don't consider it that you went into the water on Shabbos. We look at it that you went into your house. I skipped. Even if it's a 3-day Yom Tov. So Erev Shabbos was a Yom Tov, Shari Liknois Shvisa. You could be kind of shvisa on the boat. We don't have to worry about any shilas of doing achana from Yom Tov for Shabbos. But the shvisa that you were kind of on Erev Yom Tov isn't going to help you. You have to be kind of shvisa going into Shabbos. Tough. Tes Zayin be'ez oifen ein boi b'shom hachana. Ois kanach of Daled, sha'oisid, we have to finish the Ramah. Says the Ramah, the bottom line here on the Yud Beis Amud Beis. Yesh, there are those that say, when it comes to this question of being kind of shvisa on the boat when Shabbos comes in, and once you're kind of shvisa on the boat, you could get off the boat and come back on the boat after Shabbos started without a problem, and we don't look at it as an isser of tzafeh shata pnei hamayim. Yesh sha'oisin kiddush b'sfina. There are those that say that it's not enough to be on the boat from before Shkia throughout Ben Hashmashos by Tzesek Echavim. You also have to make kiddush on the boat. Yesh sha'oisin kiddush b'sfina. V'achar kach chozrim l'beisam v'lo nimsham. So says the Ramah, there are those that had a very interesting meaning when it came to this question of going on a sailing journey on Shabbos. They would make sure to get on the boat before Shkia. They would make sure to stay on the boat for Ben Hashmashos. They would make sure not to leave until after Tzesek Echavim, so that they were properly kind of shvisa on the boat. But then they would also make kiddush and eat something. Then they would go home, go to sleep for a few hours, and then come back and get on the boat on Shabbos to set sail. Points out the Ramah. All right, so let me go back into the words of the Ramah. I'm sorry. I feel under pressure because we're going so late. Again, the bottom line in Beis Amud Beis. There are those that would be makbid to make kiddush on the boat. Then they would get off the boat after Shabbos starts and go home and take a nap. Or maybe sleep overnight. And then the next morning, Shabbos morning, they would get on the boat and they would set sail. Which according to the Ramah, that's okay. We're assuming you're on a river cruise, so there's no problem with Bittul Mitzvahs on Shabbos. There's no problem with Tchumin, because it's Lamai Lamai Asar Tvachim. You're not in a situation where you're going to have to do Malacha. And you're allowed to get on the boat on Shabbos because you were kind of shvisa on the boat before Shabbos. So there's no problem of the Gzer of Tzaf V'Shat up on Aramayim. V'chein Nagu B'Tzas Mekaymois, and the Ramah says, this was the beginning in some places, V'ein Limchais, and you should not protest. V'ayin L'kamon Siman Shin Lamites V'Taf Daled. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut L'chav Daled, the very last word in Beis Amid Beis, She'ois in Kiddush. There are those that would be makbid to make Kiddush on the boat. Of course, the people who had this minig made sure that they were on the boat from before Shkia throughout Ben Hashmoshes until after Tzeis, so that they were kind of shvisa on the boat. Elishes sovereign, but they also held the lachatchila nachain lasei sham gamkein kiddush. The lachatchila you should make kiddush on the boat too. V'lecho ma'at, and to eat something kidei lefarsem hadavar, to publicize shekanu sham shvisa, that they were kind of shvisa on the boat. V'lo yavoyu lechashtam. So just the takeaway from Siv Gimel, we learned today that there are times when it's mutter to get on a boat, even for a Dvar HaRishus, within 3 days of Shabbos. How is that? It's a river, so it's Mayim HaNoivim, it's calm water, there's no Bittul Mitzvah Seinik Shabbos. It's elevated more than 10 Tfachim off the riverbed, so there's no Isser Tchumen. There's no problem that you might come to do Malacha. It's a situation where you're certainly not going to come to do Malacha. So there's no reason why you can't get on the boat on the Erev Shabbos. Said the Mechaber, once I'm telling you you can get on the boat on Erev Shabbos, you could set sail on Shabbos. If you were properly kind of shvisa on the boat on Erev Shabbos, so you were there from before Shkia throughout Ben Hashmoshes until after Tzeis, now if the boat set sails on Shabbos, there's no issue. And there's no problem of tzaf v'shat al pnei, because you got into the water before Shabbos. You didn't get into the water on Shabbos. Said the Ramah, but the Mechaber said, but you can't leave the boat after you were kind of shvisa and then get on Shabbos, because that would be an issue of tzaf v'shat. Said the Ramah, there's a sheet that holds no. Once you were kind of shvisa on the boat at the beginning of Shabbos, you can even get off the boat, get back on the boat on Shabbos. You could go home, go to sleep, get on the boat Shabbos morning. Why? Because you were kind of shvisa when Shabbos came in on the boat. Now the boat is your house for Shabbos. You were kind of shvisa on the boat, it's your house for Shabbos. You could go back home Shabbos morning. That's not called getting into the water. There's no tzaf v'shat. There are those that were makbid to also make kiddush and eat something on the boat Friday night, so there should be a pirsum. Hadavar, we had a very interesting, somewhat complicated discussion that's the Geret Hilchas Tchumen with this question of being kind of shvisa. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This list of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua's reverse parnasset shedumchim to all the need. We should be zeicher to see the B'yas Gal Tzedek. B'mher v'yameinu amen. Be well.